The first is Trump has had a ton of talks about implementing tariffs really on everything, right? He has slowly built the discussion from strategic small tariffs on individual things to bigger numbers to more widespread, even when certain interviews saying that he wanted to remove the income tax and replace it with tariffs on everything, which are basically a tax on imports that's technically paid for by the person from the other country that's importing the good. Just to give it a definition of what we're talking about. Historically, I've been super against tariffs for the reason that it typically goes to the consumer. So if I'm buying, I don't know, butter, right? And butter's coming in from, the Netherlands, right? And there's a 20% tax on butter. I typically, as the consumer, would pay 20% more. The importer is going to be paying that. They're just going to pass that along to consumers. That's the general economic math and assumption that's been going into tariffs worldwide. The issue is, and what's getting more complex, and in a weird way, we're seeing a new generation of economics unfold, is that global trade doesn't operate where everybody's on the same level. Right? So if you take a tier 3 country, I won't define it so I don't piss anybody off, but if you take a tier 3 country economy, something that's much smaller, maybe developing, maybe still industrializing, maybe still, building out their technology sector in a way that catches up, and then they're importing goods into the United States, which is the biggest GDP, the biggest economy by far in the entire world, the smaller country typically will have more to gain than the US gains by doing business with a smaller country. That changes the dynamic quite a bit. It is no longer an equal playing field. So what Trump is doing, although he might not be super eloquent with how he's putting it, he's trying to set up a system where other countries are bidding on who can import goods into the US most competitively. That does benefit the US. Whether that means the end result is more expensive goods to US citizens is still something that is yet to be seen. We've seen it go both ways. The left will point to the example that is very legitimate where there was a tariff placed on washing machines. And what ended up happening was, I think it generated like $100 million in income for the government, but it cost taxpayers $1 billion or something like that. It was a net loss. But now we're starting to see that tariffs are gaining a ton of momentum to the benefit of US taxpayers because we're now importing manufacturing back to US soil. So it's actually boosting our local economies. It's adding jobs in interesting ways. We're now using US-based technology in US manufacturing to make it more efficient and cheaper in many ways. So that calculus is different than it was previously. And what we're seeing is that China, which is the number one example, Trump has really, really hammered on them. And then the left started hammering China as well, saying we do need to tariff China. Joe Biden kept the Trump tariffs on China. What we're seeing is that we expected Chinese imports to go down. So tariffs were added. Chinese pay more for the goods to enter our country. We actually saw imports go up. So it means China is willing to pay for the right to import more goods into the US. So while historically I would have been very much against tariffs, just a concept in general, what we're seeing in global trade with the US being more US focused on both sides of the aisle and focusing on US interests on the left and the right, we're seeing that the US has strategies throwing our weight around, our GDP, our economy around, that are actually benefiting from tariffs as it's looking today.